Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. If it's the first of these you've attended, I normally do them every Friday, and it's a quick look ahead to what the big news events to watch next week, and then we'll go through some of the major markets, stock indices, commodities, FX, oil, gold, all the stuff. And then if there's any markets you want looking at, if you just put it in the chat. And then once I've finished looking at all that stuff, I'll take a look at the markets that you want to have a look at. I thought we'd start off with natural gas, having another sort of crazy 90 minutes or so. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with natural gas. We'll come back to it in a second. But it was trading around 213. It's jumped to 235. So it jumped 10%, and it's making its way back again. So I did have a quick look on Twitter, but I couldn't see any reason for that. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's get the housekeeping stuff out of the way. So this presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. It's been a bit of a quiet week. I mean, a lot of volatility the last couple of days, which we'll come to in a second, because we had that US economic data out. The market was expecting growth of about 1.9%, I think, in the last quarter for the US, and it came in, yesterday it came in, wasn't it? 1.1%. Was the number, so quite a bit lower than expected. So a bit of volatility across all sorts of things yesterday. And overnight, we saw the Bank of Japan, I think, keep its position on its sort of support and interest rates and everything else. And we've seen quite a rally in dollar yen overnight, but we'll come back to that. So a bit of a quiet week, but some volatility over the last couple of days. So looking ahead to a pipeline blew up. I saw some pipeline blew up. How is that bullish? Well, it's bullish because I suppose it's a supply and demand thing, isn't it? That it's going to affect supply of natural gas, but it has given up those gains pretty quickly. Let's see. We'll come to it in a second and see how it develops. Anyway, next week, busy week again next week. European inflation on Tuesday. It's a bank holiday. It's a bank holiday in the UK on Monday. I'm not sure. Is it it must be a European bank holiday as well, perhaps. So Monday's a day off anyway over here. But Tuesday we've got EU inflation. Wednesday we've got US interest rate decision, big one. Wednesday night. I mean, it's a big week next week. Thursday we've got the EU interest rate decision, not as important as the US one, but still interesting. And then Friday we've got the jobs numbers, the US non-farm payrolls in a week's time. So I'll be here doing the live stream then, and we'll see what markets think of the latest employment numbers in the US. Let's see what happens. So there's a lot to watch next week. This thing on Wednesday will be interesting. One of the reasons we saw, we'll have a look in a second, the likes of the Nasdaq and the S&P rally strongly yesterday off those disappointing economy numbers, is because of what that could mean for interest rates. If we are seeing the US economy growing at a slower rate than expected, it might make the Fed, the central bank, a bit more wary about raising rates so aggressively, which is good for stock markets to not have rates going up. Anyway, let's see. So let's see what happens next Wednesday with that US interest rate decision. A quick word from me, the sponsor. I run a trading course. There are 2 courses within the course. There's a medium-term trading over weeks and months, which I definitely do prefer more than shorter term trading. I've done a lot of short term trading since September, and I do find it quite draining, to be honest. I'd much rather have a trade on, run the trade, a bit like we do in these sessions. We'll come back to this, but there's a couple of trades from last week's live session I did, and there's the trade from the Nasdaq video I did a couple of days ago. I'm much happier putting a trade on and trying to run it for weeks and months rather than hours and days. But anyway, the trading course, 2 parts to the course. Medium term trading, 11 video lessons. There's a shorter term trading element holding positions for hours and days. There are 7 video lessons on that. There are 4 live webinars, or depending on what you take, there are different levels of webinars. And there's a WhatsApp group that I post in every day, just talking about what markets I think are interesting. That's when I launched the short-term course in November last year. I traded an account, a real account, with £4,000 in November, December, January. Made the results public on YouTube. If you go back to the videos back then, you'll see some of the updates. By the end of December, the account was up just under £2,200 in closed profits, so about 55% return over those 3 months. I've got to say that past performance is no guarantee of the future, but there's that. Trustpilot reviews, 5-star Trustpilot reviews. There's a newsletter. If you go to the website, you can see all this stuff. So the website is davidjonestrading.co.uk. I send a newsletter out every Saturday or Sunday, so once a week. If you're not on the list and you want to be on the list, go to the website, scroll down. Where's it gone? And there should be, there you go. There's a box there to put your email address in if you're not on the newsletter. So I send a newsletter out once a week, which is what to look out for in markets, what am I trading, and a trading tip in there as well. So that's on the website. I'll put the link to the website in the description. If you want to see the course content, you can go to the content page, the performance of my own trading. There's some information on that. And the broker I use, which we'll use today. We'll try and place, 1 or 2 trades today. I don't, there's, in terms of functionality, there's not much to choose between brokers. There's only a couple of brokers who I wouldn't trade with again. But there is a broker I trade with because I like their reporting. If you go to the website, go to the broker bit, there's a 10-minute video I've done, and you can go to the broker from there. So that's all on the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. So take a look at that. There we go. That's that. That's the newsletter. There's the website. Oh, and there's a discount code. I forgot about that. If you sign up, there are 3 different packages of courses. If you sign up for any of them before, let's say the end of Bank Holiday Monday, so and use the code April20, then you'll get 20% off those courses. So that's the code. And again, I'll put the code in the description of the video. Okay, that's it. Let's go to the markets. So actually, as we've landed on this page, I did a couple of trades last week in the live session. I bought Euro Aussie last week. That's this thing here. So bought in. When was it? What was the date last week? The 28th. So bought in here, just buying into the trend. That's done well, isn't it? That's up. I think the risk was about 50, and it's up nearly 50. Tesla. I bought Tesla last week in the live session, thinking this gap was going to get filled. Hasn't been the case. It's not a good trade. Haven't been stopped out so far, but just shows they can't all be winners. And I did that video on the NASDAQ on Wednesday, which you can watch on the channel. I did a trade on the NASDAQ. Let's have a look at it. So it would have been on Wednesday. So again, this is real money. I bought it in here, I think. Yeah, about 3 o'clock or something on Wednesday. Oh no, it's there actually. Sorry, in there. So I bought it here. I bought that sell-off on Wednesday in the NASDAQ. Put a relatively wide stop on. If you want to see the reasons why, go to the video from Wednesday, and that explains it. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move the stop on the Euro Aussie trade. Let me just, I'm going to make that a trailing stop now because it's moved a decent distance. So I'm going to just make that a trailing stop so I don't have to worry about it. How many of them have I got? 1,500. And let's put the stop loss. It was 375 points away. So let's do a 300-point trailing stop. Update that. There we go. So my stop loss has moved on that to just above where I got in on the trade. So I'm quite happy to run that Euro Aussie trade. See how it goes next week. See if there's more profit in that. But let's go and have a look at the markets. Where should we start? This is what's happening with this natural gas. So there's this pipeline explosion thing, apparently. If you want to join the WhatsApp group, Kennedy, if you go to the website, you've got to pay for it, obviously. But go to the website, there is a subscribe option in there. So you can buy the courses, you get the WhatsApp group as part of the course, but you can subscribe separately for the WhatsApp group. So go to the website, you'll see it there. So this explosion thing in natural gas, let me have another quick look on Twitter and see what's happened. I mean, the market, we saw it react perhaps how we'd expect it to react. You know, sharp move up because of the threat to supply. But it's going back now pretty much where it was before. Still can't see much on Twitter about it. Anyway. No. But I'm long natural gas. I think I talked about a trade I had on natural gas last week. It's not done much at all. Let's come back to it in a second. Let's have a look at the S&P. Let's start as usual with stock markets. So we had this, it was really weak going into yesterday. And then we had this GDP number out. And we've seen a really strong rally in the S&P yesterday. So a big move in the short term. Let's see if it can carry it on into today. But if you look on the dailies, it has been just a bit boring, really. This is where we are now, obviously on the S&P, on the daily chart. And if we go back, this is where we were a week ago. So we're basically trading the same place. We've seen a lot of volatility, but no real direction. I'm still bullish. I've got a longer term trade on the Nasdaq. I did that trade the other day on the Nasdaq. I'm still bullish on the S&P. I'd still be a buyer of the dip. It's just not the most exciting market at the moment, and I think it needs to. If we can get it, if perhaps in May we can get a bit of a move through 4,200, perhaps it starts to pick up momentum, and then for me, a target would be the highs from last summer, around about 43.25. So not the most exciting market at the moment. Stock indices. If you looked on the hourly, I suppose if you thought that yesterday's move had been overdone, perhaps there's a trade in there with a stop, above. Yeah, what was yesterday's high in the S&P? I think it's the out of hours high. There you go. So about a stop above maybe 41.50 if you thought the move had been overdone. But yes, lots of excitement yesterday. Not so much excitement over the last week or so. Same for the Nasdaq, really. I mean, there's the move in the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq hit a low on Tuesday of 12,720. I ended up buying on Wednesday, and here we are, about 600 points higher or so. But again, if we go back to the dailies, we've got, for me, as far as I'm concerned, we've got an obvious trend in the Nasdaq all this year, pretty much. Those lows. Where were those lows? 6th of Jan this year. So we're 3-4 months into that trend. Still be a buyer of a dip on the Nasdaq. I'd only start to think that this trend was in trouble if it slipped below 12.4. That's it. So so my target on the Nasdaq is whatever it is, 13.7 initially. That trade I did on Wednesday is up a bit, so I bought at 12,832. The market's 13.1, so it's a couple of hundred points, 170 points in profit. I'm quite happy to run it and see what happens on that trade there. But again, not the most exciting of weeks for the Nasdaq. Similar in the DAX, German market. I did wonder. It's interesting today. The DAX really sold off quite heavily. I did wonder this morning if that was an opportunity. I've got a longer term trade on the DAX when it got knocked back to the lows from the last week around 15.7, and we've seen it bounce back since then. I think again the trend for the DAX has been up. Let's get rid of some of these lines. Trend for the DAX has been up since whenever. September last year. We've got the all-time highs coming in around 16,300. So let's see. I'll still be a buyer of dips on the DAX. FTSE, I'm guessing, is going to look it's a bit weaker, the FTSE, isn't it? I'll still be a buyer of the dip on the FTSE. It'll be an interesting week next week for FTSE. Maybe there's a short-term trade on the FTSE next week. I mean, it has been giving up ground, isn't it? Fairly steadily over the last week or so. Let's have a look at that. I suppose we could say our downtrend looks like that on the FTSE. Lots of support at 77.20, so 100 or so points below where we are now. Still weak at the moment, the FTSE, but overall it has had a good run since the March lows. So perhaps the least positive looking of the markets, of the stock markets, but none of them looking that particularly exciting, I'd say at the moment. So there we go. But I'm still medium to longer term bullish on stock markets because of the recoveries that we have in place this year. Let's see. Let's see what happens. What else are we going to look at? Let's take a look. Dollar index is interesting. Always one of my favourite markets, this one. I talk about this one a lot. And the reason I think the dollar index is the dollar against a basket of different currencies. But the reason I think the dollar index is interesting is because it is bumping around these lows from February. Okay, so we had the dollar index had a great run from May, June 2021 up to September 22. Concerns about inflation. It was all an inflation hedge is what it was last year. But there came a point, where all of that was priced in, and the market sold off. So the market sold off from those highs, dropped about 10%, 12% from those highs, but has bubbled around these lows. I am short the dollar index. I've got a medium-term short on the dollar index. But I do wonder, is it trying to make a base here? If you were bullish on the dollar, then to me, actually, should we do that trade? I'll do that trade in this account. Maybe that is an interesting trade, actually. The dollar index. So the lows around 100. If you thought the dollar was going to rally from here, we do have that interest rate decision next week, so there could be a bit of volatility off that. Then it's an interesting risk-reward trade down here, isn't it? Let's see if I can bring it up and do a trade. Let's bring up the chart for it. Add it to here. Okay. So if I was going to trade it now, so I'm looking at the futures now, so I don't have all the history. I'm looking at the June futures. So I want my stop somewhere below these most recent lows, don't I? The 14th of April lows, which is that low there. What was that low? 100.47. I mean, 100 is, a bit of a level, I think, for the dollar. Let's say I'm going to go 99.5, maybe a bit tighter. I don't know, let's see. Let's say I go stop loss 99.5. What's my risk? $220. That's fair enough. So I'm going to buy one contract at 101.70. Stop loss at 99.5. Give the market a bit of room because it's a more medium-term trend. My risk on one contract is $220. Margin is £800 margin. Let's place the trade. There we go, done. Okay, so that's just in there now, that dollar index trade. So I think it's interesting because this has been such a big level since Feb of this year. I think if it does break below here, I think the risk is for a much bigger sell-off because I bet there's a lot of people who have bought in ahead of that level thinking, is this market basing here? And if it starts to sell off, we could see a bit of dumping going on. Let's see. But given the fact that we've got interest rates next week, I think that's an interesting market to watch. So that's the dollar index, very interesting one, I think, for next week. Other markets, dollar yen, we have had this move overnight in dollar yen, but I'm long dollar yen as a medium-term trade and a short-term trade. And medium-term because of that, I think we have had the recovery in dollar yen going now since January of this year. I think I bought in, I don't know, back here somewhere. So I'm quite happy to stick with dollar yen in the medium term. Perhaps today's move, has been overdone and we'll see a bit of cooling next week. But I'd quite happily be a buyer of the dip in dollar yen. So I think that's been interesting given the move we had overnight in dollar yen. The others, euro and the pound, not too much going on. The euro this week did push out to its best levels since March last year. So a year plus high we've had on the euro against the dollar this week. So I'd still be a buyer of the dip, euro dollar. Pound against the dollar, probably the same. To be honest, still be a buyer of the dip, pound against the dollar. It's struggling a bit with this sort of 124, 125.60 area. But still a buyer of the dip of that one. Let's see. But again, look at the week or the last couple of weeks. Pretty directionless. I found short-term trading quite hard work the last couple of weeks, and it is because where's it gone? Because of that, because we've just had quite choppy markets in the markets I watch, and not so much in the way of direction. And pound against the dollar definitely falls into that. So that's that. So nothing too exciting there, but the dollar index, I think, as a whole, is a really interesting one to watch next week. What should we look at next? Oil. just do oil and natural gas. So I've got an options trade on oil that I put on down here for the market to recover, but recover gently, because if it recovered too violently, it would put me offside, and I was offside for a while, so I'm quite glad it sold off a bit. It's quite interesting what's happened with oil over the last couple of weeks, because that was the move that was mainly on a Sunday night. It's actually a gap, this move. It didn't trade all the way up there. It closed on the Friday the 31st of March at 75.5. And then we had the OPEC decision over a weekend, which was a surprise, saying they're going to cut production. And on the Sunday night, it actually opened up here, opened up at 80, opened $5 higher. We did see the market push higher since then, but it's interesting, it has filled all of that gap since then. So it's still weak as of today. I'd still be a buyer of the dip on oil. I just don't know where that dip is at the moment. It's this is the daily chart, so it did rally all the way back to the top of the range. That range we've been stuck in for ages, and it sold off again. So I think that's another interesting market to watch next week for the buyer of the dip. Let's have a look on a 4-hour wart. Where's the big-ish support? I suppose somewhere down here, around 72-ish, and it's 74.5 at the moment. So that's maybe an interesting market to watch next week. But as we finish this week, it still to me it still looks a bit weak in the short term. The trend is still down. Got some support coming in at 72. Let's see what happens with oil next week. But that has been a market that has been moving over the last couple of weeks. We've seen the market drop by $10. So let's see what happens. And natural gas. Now, like I said, I'm long natural gas on a short-term trade. So I bought in. I did a video the other week as well on natural gas. So I bought in. I can't even remember where it was. Here somewhere, I think. A week last Wednesday. So I'm in the position. It's not really done much apart from the last hour and a bit, and it's giving that up. I mean, it's still a crazy market, natural gas, isn't it? I still think there's a chance for some short-term gains in natural gas, so I'm quite happy to be in the trade for now. But from a more medium-term point of view, you still have to say, on the daily charts, we all know, that big trend is still down, isn't it? What's happened over the last week or so pretty much pales into insignificance when we look at the bigger picture for natural gas, isn't it? So medium term still down, but from a short term point of view, we had that rally a week last Wednesday, which went further than a lot of rallies had gone since Feb. Let's see, can it build on it from here? I would say, what it's done in the last hour, if that is a gas line explosion, if it can't hold on to a rally because a gas line's been blown up, that is not very bullish. And that's me talking as somebody who is long natural gas at the moment. Let's see. Natural gas, as we know, crazy market at the best of times. Let's see what happens the rest of the day in this market. But I'm long. Stop loss. I think I got a stop loss to the side of $2 on the natural gas trade, and it's lots of volatility, but no real direction for me since I put that trade on. Okay, so that's natural gas and oil. We did. Oil's interesting. Natural gas not so interesting. Gold and silver, pretty boring. Pretty boring markets. A lot of boring markets in the last couple of weeks. So gold, absolutely, you'd say the trend is up. If I could actually draw it, trend since whenever it is, November last year, is up. But we're back up at levels that have proven to be, a massive barrier. The all-time highs for gold have been a barrier going back to 2020 now. So if it's going to run out of steam anywhere, then we're here. $2,075 an ounce, something like that. So it's interesting up here, but not so much interesting over the last week. So in the short term, I'd be a buyer of a dip, but medium term, at the moment, I would be very suspicious of its ability to blast higher through these old highs. So yeah, just a bit wait and see for me. gold. Silver. So I mean, silver is. I mean, I hate silver because whenever I buy it, it goes down, and whenever I sell it, it goes up. But if we look at the big picture in silver, going back to whatever it was, January 2021, you know, we did have a big downtrend in place. It's managed to break out that downtrend in the last month or so. Let's see what happens. Let's see how far this dip goes. So I'd be more tempted to be a buyer of the dip on silver at the moment. But again, look at the last week. You know, it's just the last week and a half. It's just nothing much, is it? So let's see what happens if that gets a bit more interesting. Silver. And finally, Bitcoin. You know, I think Bitcoin's interesting. You know, it's from a price action point of view. We've got this recovery that's been in place all this year. It hit a high for the recovery in April, middle of April. Sold off, 26.5 is held for Bitcoin. I would be tempted, for me, to be a buyer of the dip in Bitcoin. You know, not because I think it's going to a million, but because I think it's an interesting trade based on that recovery and the fact, you know, that downtrend from the old highs at 60k, you know, does look well and truly over. So I think it is for me. It is a buy the dip market for me. Bitcoin. What else is interesting? I mean, palladium. I bought palladium yesterday. Medium term trade. Just again, really, we'd had the big downtrend in palladium since March 2022. I just wonder, are we seeing the price of palladium turn around this big trend? Again, I'm normally on these sort of trend reversals. In my experience, I tend to be in it too soon. So I've got a wide stop. Bought it yesterday. See how it turns out. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on in the non-financial markets. Some of the agriculturals. You know, you've got stuff like where's the wheat chart? I mean, wheat. I went short wheat this week. You know, wheat has gone from about 13.50 on the Russian invasion of Ukraine to half to where it is today. It's been a great downtrend, wheat. I have missed a lot of that downtrend, but I thought it was interesting that it's breaking down again over the last week. So some of the not so usual markets are interesting. But in the week ahead, just to recap, dollar index, because we've got an interest rate decision next week. Let's see what happens with that one. You know, we have had these lows that have held all this time, all since Feb of this year. Let's see what happens. Is there a shock to come out of the interest rate decision next week? So I think that is interesting. You know, I always watch stock markets anyway. You know, they're okay. There's a pretty boring week on stock markets. Oil, I think, is the other interesting one to watch next week to see how far does this sell-off go in oil. Does 72? Do we see some buyers come in next week at 72? So oil and the dollar index, for me, are perhaps the most interesting markets next week. But if you found the last couple of weeks a bit hard work, you wouldn't be alone from a short-term trading point of view, because I have. You know, it's been dull. You know, really, really sort of fairly sideways. So let's see what next week brings. So what we'll do now, we'll dive in. I'll dive into the questions. But as usual, just a quick plug. Go to the website to sign up for the newsletter that goes out every week. If you scroll down the homepage, there's a box there. If you want to join any of the training courses, have a look at the performance, have a look at the broker I trade with, have a look on there. And davidjonestrading.co.uk is the website. If you use the code April20, then it's a 20% discount off the courses before the end of next Monday, which is bank holiday. And then the code becomes invalid. Any questions, you can drop me a line through the website. There's a chat box, whatever. So just get in touch if you've got any questions. Right, let's have a look at these markets. How's my little dollar index trade doing? Slightly down at the moment. Down $11. Never mind. Let's have a look at the stuff that other people want looking at. Big moves this week on Microsoft, Netflix, Meta and Nvidia. Yeah, let's have a look at those. Let's have a look at Meta. Meta had a big move last night, didn't it, I think, initially? Look at that. Gaporama. So they came out with earnings last night, Meta. So they closed... Is that last night? Hang on a second. Where are they? Oh, it's only... Okay, no, earlier in the week. So it would have been... That was Wednesday. Wednesday's close was 210. So clearly Wednesday night they came out with earnings. That's a massive gap, isn't it? That's a $30, 15% gap up on Meta. Is there a trade there? I'm always tempted to sell that sort of a move, but the big trend for Meta is up, isn't it? Oh, let's do the trade. So I wouldn't recommend this. I think it's an interesting trade. If we're going to take the view, I'm long the Nasdaq, so I'll use it as an excuse that I'm going to hedge my Nasdaq long. Let's take the view the market's overreacted to Meta. I'd absolutely be a buyer of the dip on Meta. But let's take the view this gap up is an overreaction and we're going to go short. So what I'm going to do, how high did it get yesterday? 241. So we'll go 243 stop on Meta and sell it. Okay, let's do that. Meta. Okay. What did I say? 243 I said, didn't I? That was as high as it got. 241.60. Okay, so we're going to sell Meta. So I'm going to take the view that it's overreacted. So if I do 3.2, that's the minimum. I'm going to do 32. Stop loss at 243. What's my risk there? 20. Okay, I'm happy to risk 50. So I do 9. What does that look like? I'll do 8. There we go, do 8. So I'm going to sell short, taking the view, Meta's overreacted to its earnings. Selling, stop at 243. So if it breaks out to highs, I'll be out of the trade. Let's see how that works out. So let's place the trade. Okay, it's just going to trigger happy today with trades. It's interesting though, isn't it? But absolutely, on the dailies, it's a great trend since November of last year, isn't it? On the dailies. Let's see. It'd be nice if it sold off towards the low 200s, I think, for a little buy. And what was the other one? What was the one last night? Was it Microsoft last night? I know it would have been. It looks like it's earlier in the week again. I mean, that's an interesting move in Microsoft. It was selling off into the earnings and then gapped higher and it's continued. But another example where, it was recovering anyway. Microsoft. So it's the surprise happened in the direction of the trend. Netflix. Look at those. I'll be a buyer of Netflix. No, so if I was so the trend in Netflix, obviously like a lot of these tech stocks, we have seen recovery. The trend for Netflix since June last year, absolutely up. I'll be a buyer of the dip. So the closest I would want my stop, probably the other side of 280, 285, something like that. But that looks like an interesting one, doesn't it? So I'm guessing, where were their earnings then? Where was Netflix's earnings? Is it there? No, there. So they did gap down on the earnings. So the earnings were a week last Tuesday. So they closed at 333 and opened the next day at 324. So they gapped down a bit, but they've stabilised. Should we buy Netflix? Let's buy Netflix. Let's get. How much margin have I got in that account? Oh, hang on. I've not got a lot free actually. I need to put some more money in there. Let's see if there's a better trade as we go through. And Nvidia was another big move, and let's have a look at those from this week. So it's a big week for earnings. Oh yeah, nothing exciting really for them, is there? No earnings from them, just a bit sideways. This week was the last time that I traded forex. The more I trade stocks, the better my performance is. Looks like nothing I do works in forex, but not stocks. I know. It's interesting you say that. I think. Do you know what I think might be affecting you there? Is that you come to forex like a lot of people do with a short-term mindset. So here's a chart of Nvidia, for example, right? Trend is clearly up, isn't it? Trend has been up for a while. If we were looking at that, we might be a buyer of the dip. If we'd have been looking at that over the since January of this year, we might have been buying dips on the way up. But if you look at something like the euro dollar FX market, again, we've been a buyer of the dip there. Yeah, we've had a good run in the euro over however long that is, the last couple of months or so. But I think with FX, and I don't know if this is the case, but I think this is a common problem. People come to it with a short-term mindset. So whereas they might trade something like Netflix and have a 5-10% stop loss, they'd never have a 5 or 10% stop loss on an FX pair, maybe 1%, 2%. So they come there much more short-term. Because really, to me, a market is a market is a market. If I told you that was a US tech stock, there's no reason for you not to believe that isn't a US tech stock, given the moves, but it's the FX pair. But I do think when people look at FX, they end up being far too short term. So, but if stocks is working for you, then that is the important thing. It's all about where we make money, isn't it? The Nifty 50, someone said, so the Indian market. What do you mean the Nifty 50? Don't know. It's a tricky one, that, isn't it? I mean, I'd be a buyer. Would I buy it now? I think is the question. I don't know. We did have this breakout that ended up being a false breakout in November of last year. Our Harry hindsight trade is down here in March when it sells off to the old low and it held and it jumped up. So I'd be a buyer of the dip in the Nifty 50. It's just whether the dip comes, isn't it? So if we flip it over to an hourly chart, it looks something like that. So there we go. So that'd be, so if I was a buyer now, the closest I would have my stop would be the other side of 17,500 for me on that one. So it's a market I never look at, but I think it's an interesting one based on that little recovery that's been going on. Natural gas is hell on earth. Even worse than crypto. Amazon and EasyJet. Okay, let's have a look. Amazon and EasyJet. Hold on a sec. Amazon. Did they have earnings this week? Yes, they did. What did they do? Let's have a look at their earnings. So the estimate was 21 cents a share, and they came in at 31 cents a share. Much better than expected. 45% jump. So the earnings were good by the looks of it. I mean, the stock did jump, didn't it? So the earnings came out. So the Amazon stock was trading around $105 on Wednesday, opened at 108 the next day. I mean, for me, Amazon, like a lot of these tech stocks we've looked at today, it looks like a buy the dips, doesn't it? We've got the trend since Jan has been up, very similar to some of the other tech stocks we looked at. So for me, be a buy of the dips on Amazon. I'd rather get a bigger dip than the one we're in at the moment. But it looks all right, doesn't it? To me, buy the dip. EasyJet. EasyJet, I've looked at those for a while. Let's have a look at EasyJet. There we go. That looks a bit boring to me. I mean, what would you do? I mean, clearly we had the big downtrend, didn't we? So is it breaking out the downtrend? I'd probably say it is, but it has been, this year, it's been fairly sideways, hasn't it? If I absolutely had to buy it today, I'd put a stop the other side of 440. But it doesn't look like the most exciting stock in the world at the moment. But it'd be interesting if it sells off a bit from here, if we see some buying come back in. But I mean, big downtrend, actually getting back a long time, isn't it? When were those highs? 2020, a couple of years ago. But it looks like perhaps the worst is over. It's broken out, isn't it? It's broken these old highs from August. So it looks more positive. Just a bit dull over the last couple of months or so, isn't it? What do we think about Abbott Labs? ABT, Abbott Labs. Dull. I think I would go short. That's what I would do. I think it's... What do they do? I guess they're a pharmaceutical company, aren't they? Medical specialties. I mean, what would you say? You could say... I mean, you could absolutely make the argument, the downtrend is over. That is probably a fair argument, actually. The downtrend is over. But I'd also say for much of this year, we've been stuck in a range, haven't we? So, the top of the range is at $115. The bottom of the range is at $96. So we've got a $20 range. We're trading just below 110 at the moment. So I would, if we sort of had a bit of a move up next week, I'd be looking to go short. But it's not one that really appeals to me because there isn't really a trend over the last 6 months, isn't there? But you absolutely could make the argument, longer term, we've seen the worst. But nothing too exciting at the moment. Apple. Let's have a look at Apple. I haven't looked at those for a while. Lovely. Trend is up, isn't it? On Apple. It's interesting that. We've clearly looked at this before because I've drawn some lines on it. But, we've got since the beginning of this year, the trend looks something like that. We've broken out through the highs, the October highs. Yeah. Looks positive, doesn't it? But yeah, would I want to buy here? Probably not. I'd rather buy a dip. Interesting to see what happens if it gets up near 175, the highs from the summer of last year. Let's see what happens up there. But that looks pretty positive. Glencore, the commodities company. We looked at those the other week, didn't we? Glencore. Let's have a look. Oh, that was a good short. A good little hindsight trade there. I would absolutely have gone short into here if I'd been paying attention. I would have gone short there, actually, 490. I think, for me, the trend is still down. Even though it's broken out of the downtrend, I think, as I often say, I don't believe the first breakout. So for me, if I had to put a number on it, I'd say it's more likely to drop 40p than rally 40p. That's what I would be doing at the moment on that. But you could say, I mean, the big trend, the big longer term trend, if we go back to Feb 21, is still, is that still just about up? Maybe it's trying to make its mind up, isn't it? But in the short term, I think perhaps there's a bit more weakness to come. But we've got big support down at 400. So yeah, it's still a bit weak in the short term. Let's come back to it if it sells off a bit further than here. GE, General Electric. I think this is, oh, look at that one go. I think I remember looking at that last time and it was on the breakout, wasn't it? And it has continued to break out. Absolutely would be a buyer. And maybe we'll buy that one now. So it's interesting this, we had the breakout, we had these big levels from 2021, March 21, June 21 and November 21 in at 90. Pokes through and here we go. So that is classic breakout. So let's buy it. They're about 98. Let's put a stop at 84. Let's do that trade. What are they called? General Electric. See how that one works out. General Electric. What did I say? Stop at 84, didn't I? I've got too many. Okay, so I'm going to be a buyer. I've got to buy 5 with a stop at, what did I say? 84. $70 risk. Okay, it's a bit more than I want to risk, but let's do it. Okay, it's supposed to trade. Done. Let's see. See how that works out. It's got too many trades now. But another good lesson, I'm just looking now, my open P&L, you can't see it, but I can see it, is £134 at the moment. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trades, but only 2 are in profit. Okay, a great lesson that you don't need to be right all the time. And I'm hoping some of these do end up being right, but you don't have to be right all the time to make money. Just when you're right, you need to try and make sure you're making a lot more than you're losing when you're wrong. And this is a live account. This is a live account with my money. So let's see. But I think it's always fun to do these trades on the things. But yeah, really positive. That one. We looked at the DAX. Yeah, we looked at the DAX. I'm sure XLE. Is XLE, is that oil or something? I always get confused with these. Energy, the energy sector. I'm sure XLE, for example, since the 10th of April, it's in a slight profit. Yeah, interesting one, that, isn't it? And it is. It's been a bit, again, it's been a bit boring, isn't it? But yeah, that's an interesting short, I think. TD Bank. What's TD Bank? I don't know. So it's Canadian. Why am I'm getting all these weird preference? Oh, Toronto Dominion, do you mean? Okay, let's have a look. Maybe it comes up as Toronto Dominion. Okay. Which one? NYSE. What do you think? That's a tricky one. I think that would be the trade I would do. I would be a buyer, but I think that's quite a speculative, aggressive buy, because it has been absolutely just drifting lower for the past year now. If I was a buyer today, I would put my stop loss underneath that recent low at $55. I think this is US dollars, isn't it? Yeah, it's the NYSE. So yeah, that's what I would do. So yeah, but speculative on that. Let's see. Let's come back to it in a couple of weeks and see how it turns out. So I think that's it, isn't it? There's no more questions. So we'll wrap things up there. So like I say, next week, what's interesting? Dollar index, because we've got the old interest rate decision next week. So that'll be interesting. The oil price, because we have seen it slide a lot. Where does it stop? Stock markets, we've had an exciting couple of days for stock markets. let's see what happens next week. Let's see if it can hang on to these and see where they go next week. Where am I ending the live stream? So I'm still in profit, £132 in profit overall. Let's see what that looks like next week. Nasdaq trade is doing well. Don't forget to find out more about the trading course. Go to my website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, to find out the broker I use, the one I've been using on this thing. There's a link at the top of the page as well, and you can scroll down, watch the video, and go to the broker. That voucher, April 20, will run till the end of Monday, which is a holiday for me in the UK. So you get 20% off any of the courses. Join the newsletter, join the courses, and that's it. We'll do it all again next Friday when the payrolls come out. We'll see what the markets are like then. So until then, good luck with your trading, and if you've got Monday off, enjoy the long weekend. Okay, so until next Friday, good luck.